All right, all right. We are here. It is good to be here with all of you. Good evening, everybody joining. We are glad to be able to start back our monthly lives. It's been a couple of months, so good to be back here with you all. We have an exciting guest joining us. I'll start with a brief introduction. My name is Chris Alexander. I'm here. I'm the executive director of the NAACP New York State Conference. I bring greetings on behalf of our president, Eljoy Williams, our executive committee, our leadership, our branches across the state who are doing just incredible work. We're going to have a quick conversation about the executive budget that just dropped last week. We've been reviewing the proposals, comparing them with the proposals that we've been advocating for some time, trying to understand the fiscal, the policy impacts of these decisions that are being made in Albany, while also making sure that even those issues that don't impact us directly, that we're able to understand the lasting impact on our communities. And so the work is ongoing. We do not rest on our laurels here at the state conference. It has been a journey kind of getting our branches up and running and engaged in this process. And so now that we have really a position where our branches across the state are super engaged in what's happening in Albany, but they're really conduits for this information to be taken in by their communities. We want to make sure we maximize that flow of information and that impact, because that's what it's all about. At the end of the day, I'm going to be here going through a couple of quick items. I want to first, of course, raise up for our membership that is watching and joining in, thanking them for their participation just a couple of weeks ago at the quarterly meeting. We were able to do the business, the work of the NAACP, advance some really relevant and timely resolutions, as well as get some training done, right? We are a training ground for advocates. That is what we do. We advocate, we agitate, and sometimes if we got to, we will litigate. And so I am just so excited to be here with you all, and so excited for the work that the state conference was able to get done at that quarterly meeting. We have caucus weekend coming up. The NAACP will have a significant presence up in Albany for caucus weekend, which is Valentine's Day weekend. It is always an exciting time, but we're looking forward to hearing from our president, our national president, CEO, Derek Johnson, our national vice chair, Karen Boykin-Towns, who will be a part of the programs across the weekend. We'll also be putting on panels and workshops, talking about the policy issues that impact you, that impact our communities, and that you all need to be paying attention to. We, of course, are building also for our lobby day, which is coming up on March 4th. So you will see a lot of blue and yellow, a lot of NAACP members making the pilgrimage to Albany to engage with their legislators, to make sure that everybody understands what's on the line, what's at stake, and knows that we are here still on the front lines fighting for our communities. So I want to make a quick pitch for membership. We have a significant goal this year to increase our membership, to increase the footprint, and it allows us to do the work at a higher level. We're constantly doing community-based programs. We're teaching, we're training, we're preparing, and we're also, doing work that oftentimes supplements a need that is in the community. And so if you're finding yourself trying to be a better advocate, be engaged in the process, be a part of the solution, we got a home for you, and we got some work for you to do. And so please, go to our website. You can also click the link on our social media pages if you're following, which will be our website link. Go to our website and sign up. You'll get some information about our programming, as well as some opportunities to become a member. So yes, click the connect. You get to do that right there. All right. I want to jump straight in. We're going to have a great guest, and I don't want to spend too much time because I will sit here and talk all night about policy. I'm a nerd like that. We have a great guest coming to join us. Senator Zellnor Myrie will be joining us in just a few minutes to talk about the executive budget, to talk about all things Albany. Hey, Senator, good to see you. Always good to see you. And
Yeah.
join us in just a few minutes. We'll turn it over to a conversation with him. I want to give some just a quick overview of both our legislative agenda and some initial reactions to the budget beforehand. So, budget drops. We spend our time going through it, combing through it, trying to understand the proposals, trying to assess what of our policy priorities are identified. I want to give a quick overview of our legislative agenda. We're obviously focusing on responding to the federal immigration enforcement. We have officially endorsed New York for All. We have also endorsed Senator Myrie's bill, the New York Civil Rights Act, which would allow for residents of New York to have their rights violated by federal officials and federal enforcement officials to sue for damages. And that's something that is something that we're going to talk a lot about in the following conversation. But the state conference understands that the moment that we are in as a country and as a state is one that requires all of us to be engaged. And so we're proud to stand as an advisory board member of the Hands Off NYC Coalition, doing trainings and preparing our communities so that we don't lose people, so that we don't see our neighbors disappear. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. We, of course, and issues that are dear to my heart are, of course, decarcerating New York State's prisons. We've come a long way, and we still have so much more to do. There are still tens of thousands of our brothers and sisters, behind bars who will be positive contributing members to their communities. And we're interested in making sure they have a fair process and a way to return home. And so those bills are really related to parole, but also related to giving folks who are doing the necessary work of rehabilitation inside a chance to get consideration to return home as well. We're also safeguarding the right to learn and play. Solutions, not suspensions, remains a priority issue for us. Restricting the use of suspensions for students and ensuring that continuation of education, instruction is something that's prioritized even when we have instances where students need to be disciplined. And we're also supporting a recess bill in partnership with our friends at the New York State Teachers Union, to ensure that all kids have access to some unstructured playtime, which we know is a necessary part of their instruction. And lastly, just to highlight a couple of our environmental justice proposals, we have so many communities across our state that are dealing daily with either waste incinerators in their communities that are impacting their health, or other plants and facilities that are being operated by operators who are not so much paying attention to the impact that those facilities may have on the community. And so we continue to support the bottle bill to increase the remittance from returning bottles in New York from 5 to 10 cents. That's been a long-standing proposal that still needs to get some legs. And Senator Myrie, hope we can talk about that one a little bit. And of course, a major proposal to reduce the amount of waste, particularly around single-use plastics, the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act, which we are still very, very proud to support. So what is reflected? That's our agenda and some of the highlights, but what is reflected in that agenda that we've seen in the budget? We do see a lot of AI and social media regulations, of which the state conference is very supportive of. We are embracing this new technology, but we want to make sure that it has the appropriate guardrails to keep our communities safe, to keep our young people safe, and to make sure that the environmental impact is one that we're paying attention to. So we're glad to see some policy proposals in the budget requiring labeling of AI so people can know what they're looking at, as well as some additional enforcement around misinformation and disinformation using AI in campaigns. And so there's an effort, I believe, a proposal to criminalize misinformation and voter suppression, which also includes the use of AI in doing that. And so there's a ton there, but I want to start to make the transition because we also see, of course, the governor taking on immigration reform, not the immigration reform, but the immigration concerns that are being expressed by our community members in this budget, in advancing two proposals that she's using to try to curtail enforcement activity in the state, but also similarly to Senator Myrie's proposal to make sure that New Yorkers who have their rights violated are able to seek damages. Before we actually transition, I forgot one thing. There's a bunch of other budget items around driving. And so we're interested in learning more and seeing what's going to happen there. I just want to put a flag in that because we've got some driver insurance proposals that are intended to drive down costs and by cracking down on fraud, which I think we're generally supportive of, but want to make sure, of course, that those proposals find ways to actually bring down the cost at the end. And so we'll be tracking that through the process. There's a proposal to expand work zone speed enforcement programs, which of course we know we've been dealing with the speed cameras across the state. I know they caught me a couple of times, but I know we want to make sure that those safety programs don't become a tax on New Yorkers. And then lastly, for those individuals caught speeding a couple of times, there's an intelligent speed assistant device mandate that the executive proposal creates a pilot program for. So in case the driver is speeding too much, the state or the city will be able to, through this pilot program, mandate you attach a sensor in the vehicle that will keep the max speed of the vehicle low. So that's some stuff to pay attention to in the executive budget. A lot to discuss today, but I really want to take some time. Let's transition to Senator Myrie because we've got a lot to talk about as it relates to immigration and what's happening in our country and the steps that New York State is taking to curtail that. How you doing, Senator? You all right?
I'm good. It is very good to be with y'all and appreciate the opportunity to talk through what is going to consume my life for the next couple of weeks, at least until April 1st. Fingers crossed that it's not too much later.
It is so interesting being on this side of it, having previously been sleeping in the office. It feels very different. The pressure feels very different to
It's
execute.
different. Yes. You are blessed right now. You were blessed.
But we still have a lot of work to do. I just want to start, what is your general reaction to the budget? I mean, we see some proposals. I wanted to run through them quickly so I'm not just talking because I will turn this into a class. What is your general reaction to the budget? You've seen your proposal, but what else are you reacting to?
Yeah, so first let me say good evening to everyone. It is good to be with the state conference. And like I said, I'm excited to have the opportunity to be with y'all for a couple of minutes and to go through the budget. And I want to thank you for the work that you do, the work that you have already done. It is good to see Chris in the position that he is in now. Y'all are very fortunate to have a man of his talent and direction and integrity and values helping to push forward this agenda. And of course, the President Eljoy Williams, who has been doing this work way before she got any title. And so you are in very good hands. So the governor's budget, I think she said a lot of things and is directing her efforts in the direction that a lot of New Yorkers are concerned about in this moment. Of course, everyone is focused on affordability, and that is top of mind for everyone. But the devil is always in the details on that. And I think that she hit some of the points in the details of her budget. Childcare is something that has been preeminent in our political conversations. But also, she has been talking about this. The legislature has been talking about this for many years, and I'm glad to see her redouble her efforts there to expand it. And of course, I represent Central Brooklyn, so I care very deeply about what happens in New York City. But she is expanding those efforts not just in New York City, but throughout the state. And I thought that was a good thing. I like what I'm seeing also in the affordability context. For those of you who live in a rent-regulated apartment, you know that there is something called SCREE, which is basically a rent freeze for senior citizens or older adults. That's the proper nomenclature. And there's something called DREE, which is for disabled New Yorkers that acts as a rent freeze as well. She wants to expand that and the eligibility for that. I think that is a really good thing. That's something that didn't make the top highlights, but I think is going to go a long way for that population. I liked what she talked about on guns. Gun safety is something that I have focused on as a legislator, and she has put forward some innovative proposals, some first in the nation proposals to go after 3D printed guns. And we know that ghost guns are showing up more and more on our crime scenes. But there is no penalty for manufacturers of these guns that you cannot trace. And so I like what I see on those proposals. And she also borrowed from a bill that we have sponsored on what are called auto switches, which is this little piece, little device that you can add to a gun that turns it to a machine gun. And these devices that cost $20 that can be made on a 3D printer, they work better on some guns than others. And what we are trying to do is to outlaw the guns where it is easy to manipulate and turn it into a machine gun. The governor put that in her budget, so I'm excited to see that. And you know, Chris, this is something that you and I worked on your time in the Senate and worked in and around this issue. I was happy to not see her talk about changes to raise the age. There were concerns that this was going to be in the budget and from different stakeholders, and I was happy to see that that was not included, and I'm really hoping that it remains that way.
Yeah, huge concern, of course, with any proposal that would go to increasing incarcerated population, but also for our young people, who it took so long to advance those reforms. We were the last state to continue to incarcerate our young people as adults. So glad we've gotten past that conversation for now. Yep. Before we get into the bill that we want to highlight here, the Civil Rights Act, or the governor's version of that in the proposal, in the executive budget proposal, I want to talk a little bit about process, right? So we could do the inside thing, but I really want to make sure everybody kind of gets a grounding. I walked the state conference through this last year because I really felt like it was important for our advocacy work for folks to understand the right points, the right moments to make change, right? And so process, the governor's now introduced the executive budget. What is happening now from your perspective, and what happens next?
It's an excellent question, and I'm glad that this is not the first time that we're going through the process, because a lot of times, people hear the budget and you hear, okay, the budget is $230 billion, and that is an incredibly large amount that none of us are probably going to see in our lifetimes, though, you pray and you hope. You know what I'm saying? You never know. But we forget that the budget is actually a piece of legislation. It has to be voted on. It has to be passed out of the legislature and signed by the governor. And so there is a lot that happens in between the governor introducing the legislation, which is the budget, and it ultimately getting signed in April and going into effect. So as you mentioned, the governor has introduced the legislation. She has, she's done the state of the state. She has put out a policy book with the highlights. And there is a very detailed number of bills that constitute her budget proposal. What happens now, and this just started this week, is the legislature holds hearings on that introduced legislation. And part of what that looks like is for each policy area, for each budget impacted area, there are hearings around those issues where the governor's staff, her agency representatives, the commissioners, other stakeholders, advocates, they come in and testify before the legislature on different components. It gives the legislature an opportunity to say, can you tell us more about this, or why was this not included? And if you're a good legislature, you sort of throw in some of your own priorities to see how it lands. And those hearings take place from now, started this week, and that goes all the way up until the middle of February. And when those hearings conclude, that is sort of the beginning of the negotiation process. Now we have all of the things on record, and each house, the Senate and the Assembly, then responds to the governor's introduction of her bill, of her budget, and say, this is what our budget would be. If we had control, this is what it would look like. And that is a very detailed bill, but that doesn't have the force of law. It's more of an expression. So you're going to hear a lot about people say, this is the one house, that is the expression of each of the houses, how they respond to the budget, what they'd like to see. So now we got three things in the ether. We got the introduced budget by the governor. We got the Senate and the Assembly each saying this is how we think the budget should look, and then we negotiate and hopefully get to a good place by the statutory deadline, which is April 1st, and we sign a budget, get a budget into law. And so that is an oversimplification, but that is, sort of what the process looks like. And we are at the beginning of the beginning, as the majority leader likes to say.
The beginning of the beginning.
Yes.
You went over a couple of things that I do want to just spend, a couple of minutes on. One, of course, was the opportunity for legislators like yourself to introduce items of concern. I want to get to that, but before then, these hearings happening now, right? They represent really, in my opinion, probably the best opportunity for public accountability of executive agencies. What are some things, I guess, from some of the agencies that you've worked closely with? Me and you have spent a lot of time in the criminal justice space. I've talked about decarceration today. What are some things, for an agency like DOCS or like the state police that is of interest to you? Which agency are you tuned in to having a conversation with?
Yeah, well, let's stick right in this space on criminal justice, public safety. I chair the Codes Committee in the state Senate, which is responsible for all of the criminal law statutes, our civil rights statutes. It all goes through the Codes Committee. And so as part of these budget hearings, the finance chairs for each house, they are the chairs of every single budget hearing, but they are co-chaired. They're joined by co-chairs of the relevant issue area. So for the public protection portion of the budget, as the codes chair, I get to co-chair these budget hearings. And before us comes the Department of Corrections, the state police, the judiciary, the District Attorneys Association, the defense bar, other stakeholders. And we get the opportunity to ask them questions about why a particular thing was proposed, examples of the past where there were proposed changes to our evidentiary laws, or there were proposed changes to our bail laws. There were opportunities for us to ask about investments in gun violence prevention. For a long time, what that looked like for the state was solely giving more money to law enforcement. But you and I know that is one piece of the puzzle to solve gun violence, and that we need investments in a lot of other places in our communities to make that happen. And so these budget hearings, we are acting in our oversight role of these agencies, since we are responsible for signing off on money to them. We get to ask questions and we get to interrogate where appropriate, or we get to express that we agree with a thing where appropriate. And so it is exactly as you said, it is a real opportunity for the public to have some measure of accountability. It is the only time, frankly, when there is some level of compulsion for state agencies to come before the legislature. And so we try to take the opportunity to hold them accountable where it makes sense.
Of course. And absolutely appreciate the work that you've continued to do in holding them accountable. As you know, I think folks will often say that it is so difficult to access these agencies and to understand the work that they're doing, what's guiding their priorities, if they're paying attention to some of these other issues of importance. So it's great to have someone like you and of course our other champions in the legislature, asking those tough questions. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we come here tonight to really talk about a particular proposal in the budget. We saw really two immigration proposals, I'll say, in the budget. The one is kind of protecting sensitive locations. I think that the term that's used, it's places of worship, childcare facilities, schools, and essentially requiring that federal and immigration officials show a warrant or a court order in order to engage in any type of civil enforcement there. Now, I mean, generally, that's kind of the rule. So I think that's kind of a hat on a hat. But as it relates to the other proposal, I think it's really important that the governor included this. I think it's one that we both generally support. But I want to just dive into the details. Of course, we're talking about the New York State Bivens Act, and as I said in the opening, this proposal would allow New Yorkers who've had their rights violated by federal officials who are acting under the color of law, which means they're doing their job, but in doing so also violate the rights of another, of a member of the public. And this is unique for a variety of reasons. I want to talk about the case too for a second, if we can, because it definitely was a drug case in Brooklyn. As I was doing my research, I was like, it feels, for us to be having this conversation, it feels a little serendipitous.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have a similar proposal that the New York State Conference has endorsed, the New York Civil Rights Act, which will do the same thing. It's a little bit of a broader proposal. Can you just highlight some of the differences between yours and the governor's approach to New York State Bivens Act?
Yeah. So let me first start with the difference in the title of the acts. And look, we all got our egos, and you get wedded to a thing, and you say, well, this is how it has to be. But the reason I want to start there is actually substantive, in that our bill is the New York Civil Rights Act, and as the title implies, this is applying to civil rights more broadly. This is about protecting constitutional rights, certainly within the immigration context, but also in First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, 14th Amendment context. And I was very intentional about naming it that, so that we can understand the scope and the importance of the fight to get this done. The governor's title, the New York Bivens Act, is, as you alluded to, Chris, it is in reference to a Supreme Court case, Bivens, where ultimately the decision allowed for individuals to sue federal officials if they violated their rights. And our bills are pretty similar in structure. There is a technical difference on the accountability for state and local officials, and the governor in her proposal comes at this in a slightly different way. But I'd say on balance that there are a lot of similarities in this bill, and there is no question that they are both intended to get at the same thing. And so I was really excited, frankly, to see the governor take this on. And I was in the room for the State of the State, and she went through a lot of proposals and got some cheers and applause as she went through the speech. But the loudest, the most enthusiasm was demonstrated when she was talking about this issue and holding folks accountable in this moment. And so I think it is an indication of where people are and what we're seeing, not just on the news and in Minnesota, but just today on Flatbush, one of my constituents hit me and said that one of the ICE vans were holding up traffic because they were searching a dollar van. I heard about ICE agents down in Coney Island. I've seen reports around New York City. And so we got to be prepared in this moment. And this is why I thought it was important for us to step up and introduce it. And I was glad to see the governor be on board as well.
Yeah, I mean, it has been incredibly concerning what we're seeing. As I said at the opening, the state conference is focused on training, community preparedness, but also like being very clear that this is not something that New Yorkers who are not immigrants or who have been in this country for longer can ignore. Me and you are both first generation, and so we still are very close to our immigrant roots. But I think it's incredibly important, the statement that the governor has made by including this bill, that you've made by sponsoring the legislation, and of course that the state conference has made in being clear about its support. I got a similar call this morning on the Ave in Queens. That ICE was out, and just got a text a few minutes ago about ICE being out in Harlem. And so, we are encouraging folks to stay vigilant. We are hosting another training on like ICE response and community preparedness, I believe on the 31st. And so, we've been hosting these in partnerships with the coalition, and it's been really, really important work. And seeing the fear in our neighbors' eyes is something that should really unsettle everybody. I want to just do one more on immigration, then we can transition to other bills, and that is just, in terms of your message to your constituents, but also to everybody listening and that will view this. Do you have any message that you want to make sure you get out there?
This has been a really challenging time for anyone that cares about the foundations of this republic, of our democracy, if you care about constitutional rights. And what I try to communicate to people, we had a press conference today in Albany that was intended to demonstrate our solidarity with Minnesota. And we had dozens of legislators show up and express that solidarity. And part of the remarks that I gave was, if you think that this is not going to touch you, you are under a deep misapprehension of the moment. If they feel comfortable, and in this instance, they is our federal government, if they feel comfortable violating people's rights in broad daylight, they will have no guilt, no compunction, to use the SAT word, in violating your rights. So today it is Minnesota, but tomorrow it will be you. We have to stand up and stand together in this moment. And let me be clear about this. That doesn't mean that everyone has to be out on the streets. I can tell the audience tonight, I still have a lot of residual trauma from protesting in 2020 when I was with then Assembly member Diana Richardson, now my wife, Diana Richardson Myrie, when we were out protesting and we got pepper sprayed and arrested by the cops. And we ended up having to sue the NYPD. So for me, it is a hard thing to be out on the streets. But I have a responsibility as someone that makes the law. I'm also a lawyer. I'm also someone that has fought on these issues for the entirety of my public service career. So I'm going to use every tool at my disposal to ensure that we're standing up in this moment. But for you, that may look different. You may be an incredibly talented graphic designer. You may be a content generator. You may be the deacon at your church. You may be the mayor of your block. Do whatever you can do in this moment, please, because we need all hands on deck. And I know this is already in the DNA of what the state conference does. You wouldn't be on this call if this is not something that you wanted to do. But I really want to ensure that everyone understands the urgency of acting in this moment. No one else is coming to help us out. No one else. You got to do it in this moment. And that is what I'm trying to stay grounded and focused on, even in some really disturbing and unsettling times.
I really appreciate that. And the same reticence around sending people out, especially I'm incredibly sensitive in the position I hold to make sure that we're prioritizing community safety. But I agree, and I could not agree more, that it does require all of us to be a participant in this moment. And if you're not one for the protests, please come to the training. You could be in a situation where your footage that you record, a bill that we passed after the murder of George Floyd, the right to record, which, as we see all of these recordings coming out, this is stuff that will determine the narrative of this moment. And so I want to emphasize that as well. And if you're not somebody who is out in the streets, you can come advocate with us. Come up to Albany. We'll be up there March 4th, advocating for your bill, supporting the governor's version as well, but also pushing for New York for All to ensure that communities across the state, local governments, et cetera, are not coordinating with federal law enforcement, which we think is beyond beyond the necessity at this point. Is the expectation that we're not funding this type of activity. So I want to emphasize that. I want to ask you one more question. This is just, for us, so we can nerd out a little bit. Any proposals that you are looking to see included? I don't want to give up the negotiation strategy, but if there's any proposals of importance that you think will be a great inclusion in this budget this year, I want to make sure we can elevate that and see how we can organize around them.
Yeah, look, I'd say two things. I'm gonna cheat and try to slip a bonus one in there. But the conversation around affordability, I think, rightfully focuses on how much money is coming out of people's pockets, whether it's they're spending on childcare or housing or groceries or auto insurance. But I think we don't often think about the money that is literally stolen from folks and taken out of their pockets, because we don't focus on white collar crime. We have not focused on white collar crime in this state. In fact, we have not updated our laws around scheme to defraud in close to half a century. And frankly, we have put a lot of money and time and resources into street crime. We have put a lot of people that look like you and I, Chris, away for street crime. But when the crime was of higher financial egregiousness, and the folks that look like you and I are the victims of these scams, we have not touched that. And I think that is a missed opportunity. We have seniors right now that are being taken advantage of with AI, with crypto, folks that are generating phone calls that are impersonating their grandchildren and scheming them out of life savings. And we got to do something about that and get a handle over it. So I'm hoping that we can include some updating of those laws so that we can keep money in people's pockets and allow for them to do the things that they want to do on a daily basis. And the second thing is after school. I've been talking about this for many years, and I'm hoping that that also is included in this childcare conversation. I would not be who I am today without after school. I think that we should be giving more opportunities for our young people to be engaged outside of school hours. So I'm going to be trying to push and include some of that in the budget conversation.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you, Senator. We appreciate you taking the time. We appreciate the work that you continue to do. As I always say, the work continues, and we are just honored to have champions like you fighting for us up in Albany. As I've said a little earlier, we're going to have our lobby day March 4th. Folks can click the link on our social media pages. If you are affiliated with our branch, get your membership. Branches will be coordinating their visits, their meetings, etc. But we'd love to have you on the front lines fighting with us. I want to close out here, but first I want to just, if you wanted to add anything before we close, you have any closing remarks?
No, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I'm looking forward to seeing y'all on March 4th, and this is the time. So don't be discouraged by what you're seeing. Be moved to act. And we're here. We got your back, but also hold us to account. This is the time where you talk to your legislators, the people that represent you, and say, what are you doing in this moment? Because if you can't stand up right now, then you gotta move out the seat and let someone actually get to the work. So thank you again for giving me this opportunity, and looking forward to staying engaged. I appreciate the support for the bill, and I'm cautiously optimistic about us getting it across the finish line.
Appreciate you, Senator. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. So we had a quick conversation today with our Senate, one of our Senate champions, Zellnor Myrie, who is sponsoring one of the most important pieces of legislation that will be discussed this year in Albany. We are looking forward to mechanisms being created so that we can hold, officers accountable who are regularly violating the rights of New Yorkers. But there's so many issues that we're working on, so many issues that we're prioritizing. Fighting for our communities does not start and end with the budget process, but it is a great opportunity to make some change. And so we are really excited. We hope that you are able to join us in this work. It will be rewarding. It will be as one of the most impactful things that I get to do is to fight for my community. And I hope you can join me on the front lines. My name is Chris Alexander, Executive Director, NAACP New York State Conference. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll be back next month for a next monthly live. We're going to be highlighting advocates who are doing the work in Albany, around the state, doing really the work that, frankly, we wouldn't be able to get done without them. So thank you so much for being here. You all have a good night.